Alright, today we're going to be making some fresh egg pasta and a homemade tomato sauce. We're going to start off by making our pasta dough. So here I'm adding 500 grams of type 00 high protein or bread flour. 00 refers to the fineness of the flour, so if you can't find 00, just regular bread flour will do perfectly. So for each serving of pasta that you're making, it's going to be 100 grams of flour and 1 large egg. So here I'm making 5 servings of pasta, so 500 grams of flour and 5 eggs. Once you've added your eggs, just add a little dash of olive oil and some salt, anywhere from half a teaspoon to a full teaspoon, depending on how many servings you have. Now we're just going to mix everything together with a fork or a spoon until it just starts to come together. I'm just looking for no more loose egg before I start using my hands. So now I'm just going to be pushing the dough into a mass on the side of the bowl, just gently until it starts to come into a very shaggy mass. Then I'm going to turn it out onto the countertop and try to incorporate the little loose bits of dough that are there by just pushing them into the dough. So as you can see, I'm just gathering them up, putting them in, and pushing them into the dough. Now, I had a lot of excess flour here, so if you have the same issue, you can use a couple of drops of water at a time just to help moisten the dough a little bit and incorporate some of those pieces from the counter. So I added some water there, and I add it one more time just to help the dough come together. Keep in mind you don't need a lot of water and you don't want to drown your dough. So now, once the dough has become a cohesive mass, you knead the dough. So you're basically just going to be pressing it into the countertop to build gluten. This is what gives pasta its chew, its toothsomeness, and it's important for keeping the pasta together. You're going to look to knead for around 7 to 10 minutes until you get a smooth and elastic dough. Now, once we finish rolling our dough, we want to wrap it tightly and set it aside for 15 minutes just to let the gluten that I mentioned before relax. If we tried to roll this dough out right now, it would be very resistant and we wouldn't be able to turn it into sheets very smoothly. Now, while the dough is resting, I'm going to go ahead and set up my pasta machine. So here I'm clamping it tightly to the edge of a countertop. And now 15 minutes has gone by, we're going to pull our dough out, liberally flour it since the flour won't be incorporated, it will simply wash off when we cook our pasta, and cut it into manageable size pieces. Here I did quarters, but if you find those pieces too big or you're making more servings, you can cut it into smaller pieces, no problem. Now, make sure to keep your other pieces of dough covered while you work so they don't dry out. First off, we're going to do what's called laminating the dough. So we're flattening it out with our palm and then passing the dough through the machine on its widest setting. This helps the dough have smooth edges and stops it from cracking. So once you've pushed it through the machine, you're going to fold it over on itself in thirds. And you're going to repeat this process 2 additional times, so 3 times total. Now you're just going to work your dough through the machine on finer and finer settings, and by finer I mean thinner, until you get the dough to a thickness that you like. I usually look for dough so thin that you can see your hand through the dough. Keep in mind the dough will expand a little bit when you cook it since it's going to absorb some water. Once you've gotten your pasta to the thinness you want, we're going to cut our noodles. So very similar process, just make sure everything here is very well floured so that things don't stick together. Once you've cut all of your noodles, go ahead and dust them with a little bit more flour and toss them together just to make sure that they're not sticking together. I like to occasionally toss all my little nests of pasta just to make sure nothing is stuck. Now, at this point, instead of going into boiling water, you could just throw them into a well-floured freezer bag and store them for another day. This is really great meal prep, and it lets you have fresh pasta whenever you'd like. But here we're just going to throw them into boiling water and give them a quick stir so they don't stick to the bottom. Keep in mind, fresh pasta cooks very quickly, only 2 to 3 minutes, so keep an eye on it. Next, we're going to work on our sauce. So I started the sauce before making the pasta, since it simmers for an hour, but you can make this in advance or however you like to manage your time. So we're going to start off by dicing an onion. Then we're going to have 5 cloves of garlic. These were small, so I had a couple more of garlic peeled and minced. So try to get them fairly small and a uniform size so they cook evenly. Now, the other main ingredient of this sauce is canned San Marzano tomatoes. If you can't find San Marzano tomatoes, you can use normal canned tomatoes. These are whole seedless tomatoes. So we're also adding in a Parmesan rind and some tomato paste. So we're going to start off by adding some olive oil to a pot preheated to medium-high. And we're going to throw our onions in and swap them out. We're just looking for the color of the onions to start to go translucent and a lot of the water from the onion to be expelled. So as you can see, they've shrunk quite a bit. Now we're going to go ahead and add our garlic and our tomato paste. We need to cook our tomato paste just a bit to get rid of the raw, acidic, canned flavor that you can have. Now, once we've stirred and cooked our tomato paste for about 5 minutes, we're going to go ahead and add 2 full cans of the tomatoes and their liquid. So once we've added our tomatoes, since they're whole tomatoes, we're just going to use the spoon to break them up a little bit, push them against the side of the pot, cut them up a little bit. Not a huge deal about how fine of pieces you can get them into. They'll break down a lot as they cook. Now I'm going to go ahead and add salt and pepper, as well as the Parmesan rind that I mentioned earlier. This just adds a little bit of extra flavor and richness to the sauce. Now I'm just looking for a couple of little bubbles like that before I walk away from this sauce for about 60 to 90 minutes, stirring very occasionally. And that's it. If you don't like the lumpy tomato sauce, you can definitely go ahead and use an immersion blender and make that perfectly smooth, but I quite like the rustic sauce. And that's it. Both of these things keep very well in the freezer, so you go ahead and make a big batch of each of them. We've got delicious pulled pork and accompanying buttermilk biscuits videos coming out soon, so make sure to come on back for that. And I hope you give this recipe a try. Thanks for stopping by.